Welcome to the Momentum Corporate Media Roundtable. My name is Bongani Bingwa. I'm the host of 702 Breakfast and a television journalist for Carte Blanche. And it really is my great pleasure to be your host and facilitator this afternoon. As you know, Momentum Corporate is one of the largest underwriters of death and disability insurance in the South African corporate market. So they provide group insurance, retirement fund administration, and investment solutions to employer groups in both the private and public sectors. They believe that people aren't just part of your business, they're the very heart of it. And looking after your employees is essential for the success of any business. And so they help you to do this by providing retirement, medical aid, investment, and wellness employee benefits that talk to the heart, to the lived experience, to the reality, and not just the organogram. Can you believe it? The 15th of March, yes, today marks exactly 3 years to the very date when lockdown was first announced in South Africa. And didn't our world come to a standstill? We find ourselves in a unique time. We have moved from crisis to crisis, and there's been very little respite these last 3 years. We've faced different crises now. The post-pandemic situation, we have seen wars around the world. Load shedding is a challenge. South Africa's grey listing. Our GDP numbers have dropped, and of course the South African credit rating outlook has been downgraded. The unemployment numbers haven't changed. We're seeing bank failures in the US. Those are just naming a few. And as the world continues to reel from these multiple, severe, and at times mutually reinforcing shocks, the road ahead looks even more uncertain. I mean, the United Nations is now forecasting a very gloomy and uncertain outlook for the near term. The best projections see global growth at a modest 2.4%, and even that is going to depend on a number of variables if some of the headwinds begin to subside. So we need to take a moment to reflect and to pause. Every time something happens, a re-imaging, a reimagining, if you will, a new normal is what we need. That has been the great learning from COVID-19, has it not? What was the word of 2020, as you'll recall? Pivot. The idea that you can sidestep the challenge and change the way you've always done things. Hybrid work. Now we're dealing with load shedding. Productivity has changed with things like homeschooling, home offices. All of that change was something we all had to adapt to. Leaders need to focus on what they can control. Managers need to focus on what they can control. But both of them need insights that will help understand the impact and also how to shape their businesses and the people they lead in order to cope and to stay on top of trends and to manage whatever challenges may come. So that's why, for the last 4 years, Momentum Corporate has established a thought leadership opportunity called Partnership Connect, their annual flagship thought leadership event to help leaders navigate these challenging times. And they target a number of levels, C-suite executives, but also financial advisors and employed South Africans. So each year, their market intelligence and research teams undergo vigorous research to understand the current economic climate, to better predict where the world is moving towards, to be able to see trends and the possible impact on businesses, leaders, and the workforce. As an employee benefits business, their role is to facilitate financial inclusion for employed South Africans through access to financial solutions. Education, financial literacy are right at the top of that list. And so today we are here at the Momentum Corporate offices at The Mark in Sandton. And I'm going to be joined by a fantastic panel of guests, and we're going to be wading through what leadership in a time of crisis really means. I'm pleased to tell you we've got Dumo Mbethe, who is, of course, Momentum Corporate's CEO, joining us. Elna is Momentum Head of Disability Claims and Technical Underwriting. Monalisa Zwambila, who's the founder and CEO of Riverbed. This is a leading South African agency born out of her vision to build a black female-owned best-of-breed organization. Musa Kalenga, the CEO of The Brave Group. He's an author, he's a speaker, he's an entrepreneur. We've also got Tebogo Mphafudi, who's a business development manager here at Momentum Corporate. And we're going to be discussing, as I say, the role of resilience and leading during a time of crisis. So as I take my seat, hello everyone.
Hello. Hello.
As I take my seat, the first question I'm going to pose to my panelists is a very simple one. As leaders, how are you coping? And perhaps to get us started, let me be the first to take a bite at this cherry. As I said in my introduction, I'm the host of 702 Breakfast, which is a daily radio program for what remains the country's foremost English-speaking talk radio station. Before COVID, I had a team of experienced producers who had been at the job for a very long time. They were seasoned, they were highly capable, and they were driven. They had worked for my predecessors, John Robbie, Xolani Gwala, to name just two. The pandemic hit, and it was my team that was the source of the outbreak, at least in our building. And we had to learn new ways of working. But one of the key things that I believe about leadership is that, first and foremost, any leader is the first amongst equals. Every member of your team is valuable, and if they are not, they ought not to be on your team. Here we are, 3 years later. Most of the team I inherited in 2018 is no longer with me. A number of them have gone to corporate jobs, the other side of the fence, if you will. Others have gone to study for master's programs. I think one former producer is doing his PhD. And I take that as a badge of honor, because ultimately people can outgrow their situation, and that always offers an opportunity for new blood to come in. And the leader's challenge is to get the new skins as capable and as good as the team he inherited. With that said, Dumo, I'm going to put the question to you. As a leader, how are you coping?
Bongani, I must say, it's, if I could use a metaphor, it's like being in the boxing ring and you've prepared very well and you know you're up against the legendary Mike Tyson. And you, instead of knocking him out in the first round, you're still standing after 15. And you keep hoping that, maybe in the next round, everything will come to fruition. And it's literally, I could say almost punch drunk, You go from one punch to the next. I remember when someone asked me about the new year and what my wish was. And my answer was simply, I just wish we can have our first normal year in the 2020s. Well, we know what has happened since. So I think there's also an acceptance that this is the new normal and we need to build for resilience. And here I like to use a cricket analogy. In cricket, once a captain has set the field, and they know the game plan of how to get a particular batsman out, the important thing is, regardless of what happens with each delivery, it's to stay focused. It's to stay the course. Because sometimes there's that itch, that temptation to change your field setting. And I can assure you, the ball, the next delivery will find itself to that gap you've just created. So staying calm, staying the course, and also then, trusting the team. I think one of the most powerful things around the time we find ourselves in is an acknowledgement that we don't have to have all the answers. There was no user manual for how to navigate what happened in 2020. I doubt there's any user manual for how to navigate what we're dealing with today. But within and amongst us lie the answers, and that willingness to actually tap into other people's knowledge and experiences.
Monalisa, a black female-owned, best-of-breed organization that places a particular responsibility on your shoulder as a leader of that business through these trying times. How are you coping?
Extremely good question. I reflect back to the 15th of March 3 years ago and what the feeling was at the time. And obviously a lot of fear around the unknown. But I think what it definitely did during that time was bring about this realization that as leaders, everyone is looking to you for solutions. And, you're either going to use that moment to define your leadership style and approach, or things would more than likely crumble. So I'd just like to read a quote. I'm big on them, but it talks about our ability to be daring leaders will never be greater than our capacity for vulnerability. And I think it's such a powerful statement in that what it says quite loudly and what was needed at the time was empathy, right? I think what was needed was truly an understanding of what everyone was going through during COVID, during lockdown, myself included, but to really then look to solutions from a lens that was very different from the way we had done things before. So I think just as an organization, we coped really believing in what we have now coined the power of care, and its ability to move people from a passive to an active state, its ability to really inspire people to be part of the change that we sought at the time, and obviously even beyond that. And, so I think the coping for us was, how do we use this moment to redefine who we are, to redefine our proposition to our customers, but more importantly, to be sure that we become really a leader of change in terms of what we do, how we do it, with a big belief in what creativity unleashes and makes possible.
Elna, you're next to me. Let me come to you. It's the same question, really. How are you coping?
I think, I read something that said, if you're going through hell, just keep going. And it sort of helped me a lot during this time, because it speaks to moving forward. Sometimes it's small steps, sometimes bigger steps, but it speaks to movement. The fact that, nothing is going to stay the way that it was. I mean, it's impossible. You can't go through such a huge crisis in the world and things stay the same. It's not possible. And, the other thing was, tomorrow we try again. So every day you do your best, you do what you can, what's in your control. But there will be days where things don't go as well or not as planned.
And that's okay?
And that's completely okay. And it speaks to the vulnerability that Monalisa spoke about before, that acknowledgement to say, I'm also struggling. Things are a bit tough, but we can do this. Like, we can get through this. And just remind people that even though it's tough, you can handle it. There's always things that you can control and things that you can do better. And something that was also quite important is balance. In a time of crisis, it's the one thing that goes, is balance. And to remind yourself, that you need to take care of yourself in order to take care of others. That work can't dominate your life, even though you are working from home. That, that you need to exercise and you need to do what you need to do in order to be okay the next day and be the pillar that people need. Yeah.
Musa, you are a brand communication specialist. Yeah. You're an author. Yeah. You're a dynamic speaker. You're the CEO of the Brave Group. Are you always brave? How are you coping?
Yeah, I think it's, firstly, the acknowledgement that it's not always possible to be brave is important. But I think very much aligned with the view that in times of crisis, you have to focus on the things that you can control. And for me, really, the secret has been on three aspects that come rain or shine, come COVID or no COVID, I can always control, which is my body, my mind, and my soul. And I've tried to replicate that in my team, in the sense that when you talk about the state of our minds in this context, it's checking in on making sure that I'm able to cope with the everyday requirements of leading an organization. I've been deliberate about equipping myself with tools like micro meditation, as an example, that allows me to go into every engagement far more present and check out of every engagement, right? It's a coping mechanism that allows you to show up when you think about your mind. When you think about your soul, I spend a lot of time trying to be fit for my family. I spend a lot of time being fit for my communities. And that allows me also to have a very clear escape from the craziness. And when it comes to my body, believe it or not, I have been putting in the hours very early in the morning, 3 times a day, 3 times a week, and committing
3 times
myself.
a day would be really impressive.
I'm on my way, no pressure. But it's been really important for me because it's also provided a very clear way that I feel like I have control over what I need to do. So I've focused on those 3 things. And in my business, I've encouraged everybody else to do the same. And if we're all showing up in a better state, a better energy state, it helps to navigate crazy times like these.
Tebogo, controlling ourselves is one thing, putting things in place about our environment, but in your role particularly as a business development manager, you probably more than most of us feel these changes, these headwinds. How are you coping?
Yeah, it's been very difficult. But I think to allude to something important that Dumo said, I don't think anybody could have coped, in the past 3 years, especially without support. I think we're so quick to shy away from asking for help when help is actually what we need. And I think the premise is it's important for everyone to realize, even us as leaders, that being there and providing support to people that need that support is very critical, because in return you get that same support. Leaders feed off the energy and the support of other people. And that's how I've been able to cope. It has been difficult, but really you just you use the tools that are there at your disposal and the people that are there at your disposal to make sure that you can get through whatever challenges you've got.
Let's pick up on that, because I'm looking at some of the insights that have come through from Partnership Connect, and the idea that so many leaders talk about the constant pressures they face, right? Maintaining financial stability, improving sales, reducing costs, strengthening balance sheets, managing risks. So not only as leaders in your own right, but you lead other leaders. Monalisa, how are you navigating those that you lead who feel these kinds of pressures?
With difficulty, I think, as has been shared, because the pressures are there. And I think for us as an agency, it really is around finding this balance of, we talk about, and just to break it down, we talk about when we look at care points, right? So there's care for the business, we've got care for our people, and then obviously care for the customer. And so from a business perspective, one has to look at, ways in which within the business, we're able to look to reduce costs, but without impacting people that are within the agency. So we are quite proud of the fact that during COVID, we did no retrenchments at all. We made a commitment that we were not going to retrench, even roles that at the time became redundant. We became more innovative in terms of what we sought to do and offer our clients, and in so doing focused more on growing revenue streams and obviously looking to cut costs where we could that didn't necessarily impact on the teams and staff that we had. So our growth approach also changed. So as opposed to bringing more full-time people in, we started looking at a hybrid of freelancers with a sort of contained full-time team. And so those were the things that we adjusted in terms of looking to see how we obviously maintain costs, but look to see how we grow revenue. I think what's interesting, and I'd like to share that, especially as entrepreneurs, and Musa, I'm sure you'll agree with me, we are these interesting breed of people that a lot of times forego our own salaries to make sure that our teams and people and families are safe. And it's quite a powerful proposition, when you look at it. And so how do you still ensure that care is at the center of everything you do, with an understanding of what the business needs and how to deliver on that? So that's how we've managed to cope.
Dumo, I spoke in my introduction about how it's not just the organogram, but it's rather people at the heart of the business. And yet again, the insights that you have come up with is around how so many employees are simply not just financially strained, but also emotionally stressed, right? And as a result, I would imagine one of the challenges is the decline in employee engagement.
Yes, there have been significant challenges around employee engagement. I think about 30% of employees were saying they're not feeling that engaged. And you can imagine what that means for successful business outcomes. And here people are worried about, and earlier on it was about, am I going to be okay? Then it was about, is my family going to be okay? Will I still have a job? So a lot of people have lost work. You've got households that used to be dual income household. Now they're a single income household, maybe a zero income household. Those pressures, those stresses are real and quite prevalent. So what we've had to do is really make sure that we create a good awareness of the avenues and the channels that are available to our colleagues in terms of the employee assistance programs, the assistance programs that we also offer to our clients. At least if someone can pick up a phone and talk to someone who can help, who can lend a helping hand, it starts to acknowledge that there is an avenue and starts to solve for what is a very difficult challenge. I think the other side of it, Bongani, that became quite prevalent in the results is, at 4.9, leaders, at a score of 5.9, leaders are saying, guys, you may commend us for being resilient. You may commend us for having been able to lead businesses through these difficult times. The results might look good, but actually it has been difficult to lead during these times. At a score of 5.9. 33% of these leaders also report that their energy levels are low. Their well-being is not up to scratch. So there's also an element of saying, okay, before you put the mask on your neighbor next door, the oxygen, that proverbial oxygen mask, make sure you put it on yourself first. To really be able to lead businesses successfully through this time, one of the things leaders have had to contend with is that actually you need to be okay to make sure that everything else is okay.
Because you can't be looking after other people if you yourself are not.
No, not a chance.
But Elna, it cascades all the way down in many organizations. I mean, we have seen retrenchments across the board. And one of the things that people are now starting to experience are, we've got new phrases, quiet quitting, for example. The idea that I'm now doing, or we will split between ourselves, Musa's job because he's no longer in the business without the extra remuneration, with our own pressures in terms of our own roles. Talk to me about what you are seeing as far as employee wellness at this time.
Employee wellness at this stage is quite a concern across the board. If you think about the study that we've done, the research with the Partnership Connect, it's very clear that retrenchments has a significant impact on people whose colleagues have been affected by it. So if you look at the general well-being score, it's 7.5 out of 10. But if you take the sample size of people that's been affected by colleagues being retrenched, it goes down to 5.9, which is a lot lower. And, it impacts on people's motivation. They say that, around 70% people are very negative towards their jobs. And about 53% of them said that their workload has substantially increased. So even though companies are really proud of the fact that they do more with less, it's very important that we keep in mind that you stay conscious of the pain points and the struggling points during that. Because if you have negative employees because of workload or retrenchments or lack of recognition, it will impact your engagement of these people in the workplace and in the end the culture.
Yeah.
And that cannot never have a good outcome, especially your post-retrenchment population.
Tebogo, it's not just companies that are doing more with less, right? It's also what then people have to deal with in terms of things like the cost of living crisis.
Yeah.
What are you seeing there?
So just to add to what Elna said, just as early as yesterday, I was actually having a conversation with an employee who was looking to actually resign in order to get their pension benefits to meet the cost of living, the expenses that they've actually accumulated. And it's not just the current cost of living, it's debt accumulated to counter the cost of living. So you're almost working backwards. People are trying to work backwards and trying to find ways to solve, all of these different problems. But to tell you the truth, people are really not coping. And to use the word desperate is not even an overstatement. People are trying to clutch at something that's going to help. And when you listen in on the conversations as well, it's no longer a request for assistance. It's actually become, please, help me. I'm in this situation. And especially from one of the EVP expos that we had for employee benefits as well, you've got a lot of staff that are saying, I'm trying to be as productive as possible for the business. But because of these conditions, I'm unable to be as productive as can be. How are you coming to the party to help me? And I think really the challenge and the marker when it comes down to trying to help people manage the ever-escalating cost of living is trying to provide solutions that are valid. And a lot of the times we probably look at the here and now, but we need to probably have a bit more foresight in terms of thinking going forward. How do we mitigate this agility of disruption, if I can use that phrase? Because people are constantly facing challenges, and the challenges are unrelenting, and they're changing their dynamics, coming in from different channels. So we need to start understanding that, look at the bigger picture, don't think now, but, well, consider the now, but also plan to counter any things that could potentially come about.
But as I'm listening to you, I'm tempted to think, hasn't change always been the one constant we're all certain to experience in life? As South Africans, we have lived, possibly in the last 30 years, through one of the most dynamic periods in our country's history. Change has always been with us, or is that putting it too simply?
No, and you're 100% right, Bong. And one of the things as well, coming the side that I was thinking about was that we do understand that change is a constant, but what do we do about the change? I think that's the key message. You look at a lot of the events that have taken place over the past 3 years. So let's talk about load shedding. Now there's a drive to go the green route, but the green route and global warming has always been a challenge. There's been a broader discussion around the challenges we are facing now. Similarly, I'll use the pandemic. Yes, it's an extreme, but it talks then about some of the health challenges, some of hygiene challenges as well. How many people had used sanitizer so frequently before the pandemic? Probably nil to none. And not to say it shouldn't have been used, but I'm just highlighting that there are a whole lot of things that we probably on a bigger scale should have been considering. And with the constant changes, we need to look at solutions with more foresight.
Bongani, something else that comes to mind here is, more often than not, where we have had to deal with crisis, it has been for short spaces of time. I mean, on this day 3 years ago, there was an announcement that a lockdown was about to happen. And at that time, it seemed like, okay, it might be a month, it might be 2 months, it might be 3 months. Instead, it was close to 3 years. I mean, psychologically, very little can prepare you for that. I think as South Africans, we have demonstrated resilience. South Africans always make a plan. Even in the toughest of times, we make a plan. You see,
we're all Buddha that way.
Yeah. South Africans make a plan. But how often and how long, for a sustained period, can you actually take having to make a plan? And I think that's where the uniqueness of the situation reveals itself.
Yeah, because I've been asking the same question, because I mean, you see it, and in the narrative that people are like, we've done it, we're now tired. So when does resilience become a weakness, right? So if you're going to be exposed to this for so long, there must be a breaking point. There must be a point at which it's not possible to do more. And that's not taking away from the spirit of wanting to push through and to find solutions. But I do think that there's definitely a groundswell of, at which point is breaking point.
And in a sense, part of this conversation has been about the lucky ones, people who belong either to businesses that are led by entrepreneurs who are prepared to sacrifice and take the hit, right? We're talking about corporates that put people at the heart of their business. You can well appreciate what it's like to be in the gig economy, where it's contract-based work, where there are no nets to support you, to catch you. How is that played out?
Well, I think there's a very important conversation from a maturity perspective that we try and encourage our managers to have with their teams. And it's a very sensitive topic, and it's also one of those topics where people generally have a polarizing view. The view that the one organization that you're working for is able to provide for you financially and ensure that you're safe and you're taken care of is idealistic. In the event that anything happens to your source of income, it's a complete compromise. So if you take that as a departure point and you try and shift away from that concentration of risk, I really encourage conversations around what else are you able to do with yourself? What else are you able to do that dilutes the risk of having ultimately a salary being the only thing that you're relying on and your family's relying on? And it's a tricky conversation because you're ultimately encouraging people to go out there and find other things to do with their time. But I do believe that it's a more responsible conversation to have, because the reality is, as you're equipping people, I also believe the process that we have in place is to manage the level of performance, delivery, and output. And provided the performance, delivery, and output are not compromised, the question for me is, why don't you encourage them to find other things to do with their time? According to the data that we've collected, most people spend 40 to maybe 55% of their time gainfully busy within their role formally. Question is what's happening the 45 to 50% of the time that they're not.
That's
gainfully
significant.
employed, right? It's significant. And the question is anything else, right? My question is put to them the fact that that percentage of time could be found doing something, whatever it may be, that could help, number one, de-risk them, but number two, also allow them to start appreciating what it means to be an entrepreneur. We're very fortunate, our ethos and where we come from as a business is very much about an entrepreneurial mindset, so we encourage that. I appreciate that not all organizations are like that, but it has helped us. It has helped us to have those proactive discussions and to kind of liberate people to know that it's okay. And in so doing, it also demonstrates quite a lot of care about what they're going through.
Elna, a business like Musa perhaps can do that, right? But how agile are most corporates around centering their approach to work based on what the people want, the people desire?
I think realistically, everybody strives towards that. I know Momentum specifically, that's one of our core things that we want to achieve is put people at the heart of the business. But within a corporate, there will always be space to develop and design and think creatively and new. But it's a lot more fixed. Contract work, that sort of thing, the core of the business doesn't comprise of that. And, in our world that we would provide insurance for people that don't have a salary, should there be a medical condition or a death, that would then be that safety net. The challenge that we are having is we're seeing a lot more people making use of those benefits for things like mental health disorders. We've seen a substantial increase in disability claims from 8% to 11% in a couple of years, which is really, really substantial. And if you look at middle management, you said you encourage your leaders to also have that discussion and the chat. We've seen, that it went from 18% 5 years ago 27% now for people at managerial supervisory levels, where they are claiming for mental health disorders a disability benefit and not returning to work. Because, now you need to be entrepreneurial, try and secure a job, think of different ways if there are no jobs available. And that is not something, I think, in a corporate world where people naturally will go there, that I need to think of different ways to gain an income, which I do think is a benefit, if you have an ethos in your company where that is something that is crucial and critical.
I talked earlier about the pressures on leaders, but in terms of the general workforce, one of the things that's coming out is low energy levels, the sense that people are feeling burnout. I think somebody asked the question, how much longer can we expect people to continue to be resilient? How are you dealing with it, Dumo?
Yeah, the risk of burnout is real. this whole concept of crisis excellence, which I think we were all giving ourselves high fives at some point, saying, geez, look at how well we've been able to do in the face of a crisis. I think the reality is that the adrenaline levels, in fact, the adrenaline is gone.
Yep.
And once you are beyond that point, it really becomes around, centering people around a clear vision, clear strategy. A month ago, we were having our strategy conversation about where we want to see ourselves in 2027. I think it's important to give people something to look forward to, a common vision, a dream that they can really resonate with and connect to. And I think a lot of companies, actually, even in our research, we saw a lot of companies during this time have actually used the opportunity to update their strategic direction, their strategic visions, connecting their people to those visions. And then being quite deliberate around equipping people with the necessary tools to survive, and to, in fact, not survive, but to thrive. And a big part of this, Bongani, involves listening. It could have been very easy for us to say, shucks, we've got these buildings that we need to pay for and sustain, suppliers and providers who support us in these buildings. Therefore, as soon as someone gives us the green light, everyone is back at the office. Had we not asked, that would have been the more likely answer. But after actually asking and sense checking where colleagues were in terms of their views around work from home, return to the office, or a hybrid, the answer around hybrid actually emerged from those conversations. And I think it starts to give people a sense that, okay, our voices are actually heard here. Yes, it's not one way to say, okay, everyone will work from home, but it's an acknowledgement. So that the whole hybrid way of work is an acknowledgement of people's lived experiences and realities. I think we're even at a point where when people are working from home, we have to look at the ergonomics. So we have to let people take their chairs from the office, come take your chair. Because after sitting on your chairs at home, the dining room chair, that's not quite designed for work. So I think it's some of those things, really staying in tune, being in a continuous two-way conversation with colleagues.
So we listened when the pandemic hit. We listened in terms of how to deal with a post-pandemic world. And now we're faced with an all too familiar reality. It's sort of new in terms of its impact, but it's been with us for some time. Even this conversation has been timed around what?
Load shedding.
Load shedding, right? So how are we dealing with that as an additional impact on businesses and the workforce? People pivoted during the pandemic, took their chairs home, but now they don't have power.
So I think earlier on we mentioned really informing our members around the tools that they've got in order to combat some of these challenges. For example, one of the products we've got, pension-backed home loans, which we've seen a significant uptake in. It really is a low form of financing that members can use to install, for example, your inverters, your solar panels, so that they can function or work optimally from the home. So the tools are there, but I think a lot of the time there is a gap in terms of how the information around the availability of these solutions gets sent out there, and that is one of the things we as a business are actually embarking on and moving forward with. But obviously not all solutions solve all problems, and that's where we've just really got to be able to pivot, and Dumo mentioned the listening capability. So if, for example, the solar energy is not the solution for certain members, then what is? And then how do we implement those new requirements or new requests for our employees in order to work a lot better?
Musa, I mean, in the time of the pandemic, I'm sure you've given your fair share of keynote addresses from the comfort of your own home. How do you explain to international audiences the disruptions?
You bake it into the narrative. Look, I mean, I've always operated from the principle where I am is where I work, right? So I've tried to design certainly my work environment around that. But the important thing to do is acknowledge that not everybody's got the muscle around the dexterity to find spaces to be productive. Load shedding is a material challenge, especially in creative spaces, because it relies on people coming together around specific problems, and the exchange of energy and dynamics towards solving a problem is a crucial part of the process. We found that when we had our creative teams working from different locations, it made it really hard to get to impactful solutions quickly. And so I think that's probably a different case study. And so we encourage them to come back to work from the office. And obviously we needed to make the infrastructure investments to make the office work ready. But certainly in the creative spaces, we've seen the value of having teams co-located, and when they are co-located, to ensure that there is no challenge from access to electricity perspective. The rest of the functions in the organization, I really have encouraged us where you are is where you work philosophy. And I think also in a funny way, we speak about the low energy levels. I believe that putting people in new and different environments is one of the tools that you can invigorate people, right? If you ask someone to work from 3 different locations that inspire them this week, and they'll be able to work from a coffee shop and then go to work from an art gallery and then work from a sneaker shop. For me, I think those are the tools that, number one, give people the ability to know that productivity is not tied to a desk and a chair, but that aspect of lifting energy levels is an organic way that people feel as though they can still be connected to the organization, get the energy levels up, and deliver output.
Monalisa, how have you had to navigate this? I mean, the pros and cons of hybrid models with electricity challenges, bringing people back, collaboration. How are you navigating it in your world?
We are managing pretty well, and I'd just like to go back to something Dumo said, in just really in the context of clarity of vision, right? Because I think challenges will be there. Load shedding is really one of them. But what we've done as a business is being very clear around articulating what our purpose is and what our vision is, as a business. And really ensuring that our teams are investing in being part of reaching our BHAG, our audacious goals. And what that does is it moves people into a space where they become part of the solution, where we are having conversations with them to say, how do we solve for these things? Because all of us are chasing a very similar vision. And so, to your earlier point, we have a plethora of challenges, ones that we possibly don't even know about. And if we have a vision that we very clearly articulate, ensure that teams across the business, from the lady that's making tea to our strategist, creative teams, etc., are all invested in finding whatever solution is required. It ensures, I think for us at least, it's helped with the productivity piece, because people feel they're invested in finding solutions that will enable what we're trying to do. And there's also incentives that if we reach these milestones, everyone can celebrate as a result of that. So that's helped a lot. When it comes to the hybrid model, I've been very old school in my approach, but obviously open to change, which as leaders we need to be. And once again, it was quite a collaborative discussion that said where do we work best? And what we found, because of creative teams, we also have, PR teams and strategy, that collaboration is actually quite key to our value proposition. And it's best suited in an environment where we're working face to face. We also understand that, at least for us, the hybrid model didn't work as well for culture, and culture is a very big part of what we see as a key differentiator for the business. And so being, together, finding and solving problems for customers, for ourselves, in a collective environment has really worked for us, and that's the approach we adopt.
I'm going to round off our conversation by leaning towards the opening question, right? We've spoken about controlling what you can. We've spoken about a people-centric approach, and then there was the example of putting on the oxygen mask on yourself before you help your business, before you help the teams that you lead. Dumo, let me start with you. What has been a very clear example for you in your leadership experience of putting on that oxygen mask yourself first?
Yeah, so look, and I'm always trying to do this. The team will probably laugh at me, but every year I've got these health goals and all of that. So I think I've had to be a lot more deliberate around taking the time to actually exercise, to go on these bold initiatives to try and lose a few kilos, and also just to spend time with family. So spending time with family and spending time with self, thinking time. So the diary, I mean, it's there and it will be full. There'll always be something that needs to be done. So it also has required me to forgive myself and to be willing to forgive myself for not being available 24 hours a day. And I think in doing that, actually, there are knock-on benefits because as a leader, unfortunately, that email that you decide to send or on a Saturday or a Sunday creates a chain reaction that disrupts so many other people's lives. So I think starting with that discipline of, and hopefully people can vouch for this, but I really try not to send emails on weekends. So, I mean, those are some of the practical things where I've genuinely had to take the step away, make the space, make the time to actually water this garden first, and then everything else will take care of itself.
Elna, your oxygen mask, what has that been for you?
I think Dumo gave such beautiful examples, but I think, to be deliberate is definitely something, you can decide that you want to look after yourself and you're going to have the balance and everything, but you have to be very deliberate about it. Make the decision. The inspiration to exercise is not going to hit you when you wake up in the morning. You need to decide the day before and not overthink it once that alarm goes off. Just get up and go. And, I think, to always stay in touch with where you are. When things are tough and busy around you, knowing where you are and in terms of, if you're on Chapman Speak, are you at that corner where you hoped it's over now and now you still need to continue? Or are you in the beginning of your race and you feel that you still have the energy to keep going? Because I think if you know yourself well, you'll be able to pace it, you'll be able to know when you need to just be, do something where there's no demand on response. If it's watching a stupid movie or spending time with your children or, exercising. But I think that for me was...
Candlelit dinner.
Well, that's still a demand on response. I'm not thinking nobody talks to you.
My trick with the exercise thing is, it's fine if you don't feel like going to the gym.
Yeah.
Just put on the clothes, see how you feel. That's my agreement with myself.
Yeah.
I'm not asking you to go to the gym. I know you don't feel like it right now. Just put on the clothes, see how you feel. And invariably, what happens. Tebogo, from your point of view, putting on that mask, what has that been for you?
Yeah, Dumo took sort of some of the words from my mouth, but for a real live experience, for example, last year around November, I was actually in hospital in ICU. And when I came out of ICU, I remember asking my wife to bring me my laptop because I knew there was something important that I had to attend to. And my wife had to, give me the look of, you must be out of your mind if you think I'm going to do that. And for me, it was that realization and that oxygen mask, take care of yourself first. Things will continue. But by understanding that, the rest of the team is there for support, and they understand that I've had to put on my own oxygen mask, I'm able to do the same for the team as well. So, the support is there. So for me, it's also just taking time out for yourself and understanding that, you've got to be able to look after yourself in order to cope through this time. And being deliberate about it and making sure you understand that you're numero uno at the end of the day is very, very important. So, I echo exactly what Dumo said. You've got to take care of yourself.
Monalisa, taking the hits, making sure there are no retrenchments.
Right, it's a tough one.
Who looks after you?
It's a tough one, especially being a single woman, right? It's been interesting with me. I think I've always sort of looked at opportunity costs, the opportunity of looking after myself versus running this business, right? And but over the years, one realizes that you do need to refuel and recharge. And so I have started to sort of look at hobbies that interest me. Interestingly, I'm quite an avid jazz pianist. I play a bit of jazz, and so I've taken time to start doing that a lot more. And reading, I love reading. So Sundays I tend to allocate a few hours of my day to read the newspaper, listen to some music, play a bit of jazz, and prep. See, it goes back to the work. Prep for the days ahead and be intentional about Mondays and the week ahead.
Musa?
Yeah, I'll take inspiration from. I'm a bit of a petrol head, so I watch Formula One.
Yeah.
I hope you're not. I hope you're Hamilton.
Yes,
Team Hamilton.
yes,
There we go.
yes.
You can stay.
LH44.
Give him a better car.
But there's a very poignant quote that says, "Sharp turns in a road are only dangerous if you forget to turn." Right? And if you watch Formula One and the speed at which they go around some of those corners, the dexterity required to drive that car means that you have to be aware of being able to turn. So my oxygen mask is in realizing that I've got a very key role to play in enabling all my team to be able to understand how to turn. And so it's really simple. It's 3 words. I ask them, "How are you?" And it's fascinating because every time I ask that question, whether it's on a message or in person, the instinct is to start telling me what they're doing. Right? The instinct is to start reporting back. And I've had to stop people a few times and say, I'm asking, "How are you?" Right? And I literally have to ask that 3 or 4 times before it sinks in. So when you're in the inertia of just doing the work and getting things done, the oxygen mask I wish someone could ask me sometimes is, "How are you?" And that pause moment for me is enough to be able to continue.
So glad we started with how are you coping?
Yeah,
Right?
there we go.
Dumo, I'll let you have the last word on all of this. Momentum Corporate would want to position itself as a thought leader as far as employee and leader well-being and that space. Practically then, for you, what's your message around how this business sees itself, how this business sees with how it engages with its clients, and really, I suppose, as a summary of this conversation?
Yeah, Bongani, I would hope that in the conversation we've had and the manner in which we've had this conversation and how we have centered this conversation, it's really around, and at least I would hope it's reflective of the fact that we genuinely prioritize the human experience. I think in our industry, it's very easy for companies to want to be the smartest in the room or the most technically advanced. But actually, when we looked at it, the realization was the one thing that is consistent and connects us all is our humanity. So as an organization that really seeks to prioritize the human experience, and an organization that acknowledges and lives, our tagline that says, "The success of your people is our business." We have the front row seats to corporate South Africa and the employees within corporate South Africa. And anything that happens within that ecosystem is a determinant of our success. And if those businesses succeed, if the businesses grow, if they're able to attract and retain talent, that means it's full marks for the work that we've done. And as custodians of a business that looks after 7,000 employers in South Africa and almost 2 million of their employees, I do believe that ours is to make sure that we build upon a business that will be in a better place when we are no longer there. And I hope that one day my daughter might work for this organization as well, and many more South Africans to actually be able to benefit from the solutions that we offer, and ultimately have better lives for all.
Recently, the American actor-producer Tom Cruise filmed in South Africa, and he went to an awards ceremony because it's awards season. It was the Producers Guild Awards. And he spoke there about his discovery of the philosophy of Ubuntu in South Africa. And he was telling the world to come to South Africa. And doesn't that really ultimately underscore what we've been saying? We've spoken about change, unexpected change, dramatic change, dealing with that change. We've spoken about controlling what you can, a people-centric approach, but putting on that mask on yourself. And what is the philosophy of Ubuntu? I am because we are. We are because I am. Thank you very much. You've been a fantastic panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.